Okay, well, I apologize. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like our air conditioning isn't working, so I'm a little warm. I'm sure we're all a little warm. We got a lot of wool going on here. So. I am going to hand it over to Lori, and please join me in welcoming Lori Jacoby. Thanks. Oh, no, you won't make a weird sound. Just don't get too far away.
I don't have to put it over here, just leave it there.
Well, I mean, you want to be able to talk into it. Okay. So.
Thank you, Katie and Anna and all the staff here at the McCrosty for hosting this exhibit and so capably and calmly and getting it done. And I've decided that in my next life, I want to come back as Katie Marshall. I also want to thank my nephew, Mark Jacoby, for all he did to help visualize this show and to make the beautiful headdresses. And we've been working on this for a long time. And I also want to thank my husband, Cody Lowry, who's here somewhere, who's really supported me and this work for so many years, whether he's building or driving or schlepping or photographing or listening. And Mary Jane and her husband and son Michael, who have done the same, the schlepping and the driving and the photographing and everything for us over the years. So thank you. I look out and I see so many familiar faces, and I thank you all so much for coming. You have all played important parts in my journey to be here right now. My name is Lori Jacoby, and I design wool blankets woven either at the Faribault Woolen Mills or the Pendleton Woolen Mills. So some people have asked me if I weave them myself, but no, I don't do that. And I also make felted rocks and flowers. My partner, Mary Jane Miller, will you stand, please? She makes clothing out of my blankets. And as you see here, these incredible constructions. We have worked together for over 40 years when we first met in the graphic design world. I was a designer doing Anna reports and corporate identities, and she was the much sought after freelance production artist in the days before computers, where she created all the printer's artwork by hand. In fact, if any of you are familiar with this book, White Wolf by Jim Brandenburg, Mary Jane keylined the whole thing. So I'm here to tell you my story, how I got here and how I got to do what I'm doing. I did not come from this area, but I do believe that it is the address of my soul. I grew up in inner city Chicago, and I remember when I was 13, 14, 15, I would leave our apartment building and I would get on my bike and I would ride for miles to the end of the city to sit in the forest preserves by myself. And I just loved being there. It was so peaceful and so free. But I didn't stay long because it's not really a safe place to be a young girl sitting in the forest preserves outside Chicago. My mother never knew what I was doing. But I came of age in the late 60s when that was a time of great social and political upheaval. My high school was in the heart of it. I was in the minority, and we had race riots on a regular basis where I was hit by bottles and ketchup and chocolate milk and had to hide under the tables. And I regularly had to run home from school, which was a 2-bus ride trip. And the Black Panthers hid out in our bathrooms. The police lined the hallways. And when the city was on fire, when Martin Luther King was killed, the National Guard was sleeping in our gymnasium, and their tanks were in our parking lot. My brother was in Vietnam. My father died of cancer when I was 21. And a year later, I had to drop out of college because I had a diagnosis of cancer. And I truly, truly did not believe I would live to be 30 years old. But I did slowly recover, and I returned to school at the University of Illinois to study graphic design. And that is where I met a teacher who would profoundly impact my life. While studying the Japanese arts of tea ceremony, sumie, and Japanese flower arranging, or ikebana, I learned so much about the Japanese respect for nature and their design aesthetic of simplicity while still capturing the heart. My teacher, Professor Gunji, taught us that when you cut a flower to arrange it, you are cutting its life short. And your job is to make that flower as beautiful as you can in the short time that it has left to live. And it is the same with our lives, that we must make them as beautiful as we can in the short time we have to live. Because that message really hit home with me after what I had been through to get to that class in my late 20s. And I think it became my unspoken mission statement. After graduation, I moved up to Minneapolis for a great job in a great design firm where I met Mary Jane. And eventually, I created my own firm with a partner, and that's when I got the job of designing the Blandin Foundation logo and a couple of annual reports. And that was brought me up here in 1987. I fell in love with this place. But after another diagnosis of cancer, I knew I had to save myself and leave the stress of the city and my business and moved here. It wasn't easy. I lived alone at the Sugar Hills Ski Resort with my 2 cats, and we spent a lot of time walking up the ski trails together, and I was wondering what the heck I was doing here. But I longed for the peace and the healing, and the trees told me I would be okay. I learned many wonderful stories from the Native Americans here that I'd never heard before, and they were so healing and comforting. And for their wisdom, I am so grateful. And then John Bauer, wherever you are, showed me a cabin, which I eventually bought and turned into Twin Pines Rest Home for the Creative. And so many of you who are here tonight have helped me in so many different ways during that difficult time. Thank you. And then Al Kruger of Good Vibes used to be a shop in town. He appeared and asked me to design blankets for the Faribault Woolen Mills. I decided that I wanted to use that opportunity to share all those beautiful stories that I had learned and weave them into my blanket designs. Over time, I researched and found stories of other lands and cultures and times whose wisdom spoke to me. My mother was born in Sweden, so I eventually turned to the stories of the Vikings, and then the Celts, and of late, the Taoists. Mary Jane had left the business and began to make clothing out of my blankets, and she turned her incredibly precise production skills to sewing. For 30 years now, we have been working together creating the clothing, and her work is exquisite, and her personal attention to detail and fit have made her beloved by hundreds of customers over the years. I don't know anybody who's done what she's done. I do believe she clothes their souls as well as their bodies. I'll never forget the words of an old man giving a tour in a craft museum I visited while in Japan, who said, "Usability equals beauty." And I think that's what we've tried to create, objects that are useful, that heal and clothe and teach and comfort. Now, this exhibit is a visual representation of my creative journey, including the cultural wisdom teachings that inspired my work over 30 years. Now, I acknowledge that what I did 30 years ago, sharing stories that I found and did not make up from Native American traditions, I would not do today. I completely understand that they are not mine to tell. 30 years ago, we did not hear them in the larger culture, but today, Native people have their own voices and spaces to tell their stories. And I think that is wonderful and very long overdue. But what I did then, I did with the greatest respect because those stories resonated so deeply in me. But I still do feel that there is a golden thread that connects all these different wisdom traditions that all point to a healing connection to nature. These ancient beliefs are timeless, and we are not above or apart from the natural world. We are only a part of its web. We must regard all the species as our neighbors and teachers if we as humans are to be well. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I know Lori's around if anybody wants to have some follow-up conversation with her, but thank you so much for being here and for your attention and for being a part of this experience. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.